I didn't think I would share this story, but I really need to talk about it. I'm Robin, and I'm 45 years old. I have a successful restaurant in the city. I built it from scratch, and I am really proud of it. 5 years ago, that restaurant introduced me to someone I thought was special back then. James, which is not his real name, was a contractor I hired to do some renovation work. He was nice, worked hard, and had eyes that made me feel I could trust him. While we were fixing things up, we began to talk a lot more. He shared with me about his daughter, Lisa, who was 13 back then. He explained how he had been taking care of her by himself since his ex-wife lost custody because of her drinking issue. I started to really look forward to our meetings, and then James asked me to go for coffee. That coffee became dinner. Dinner became a date. Then suddenly, we were chatting about getting married. Everything looked great. James paid close attention. Lisa was nice. I felt like I had finally found the family I always wanted. We got married 1 year after we began dating. James and Lisa came to live in my house, and at the start, everything was great. I worked hard to be the best stepmom I could be. Lisa and I cooked together, went shopping, and I made sure she had what she needed. I paid for family trips, bought her clothes, and tried to give her the life I wanted when I was her age. Lisa saw her mom sometimes, which made me a bit uneasy because of what I knew about her past. It seems she nearly set their house on fire several times when she was drunk, and that's why she lost custody. But James said it was important for Lisa to keep that connection, and her mom was said to have gotten sober. "She's still her mom," he'd say whenever I showed worry. Lisa wants to feel that her mom still cares about her. When I saw Lisa's mom at a school event, she didn't seem sober to me. She moved a little while standing still, and her eyes seemed to have trouble focusing. I stayed quiet. In the end, it wasn't my place to get involved. I was only the stepmom, correct? If I had known back then what I know now. If I had known that wanting to be the perfect stepmom was making me miss what was really happening. But looking back is always clear, right? The real trouble hadn't even begun yet. Not at all. Time went by quickly, and soon Lisa was turning 18. She felt really stressed about her birthday and graduation coming up, walking around the house like she couldn't relax. What if something bad happens? She kept asking. What happens if people don't show up? What happens if it's not perfect? One evening, I hugged her when I saw she was overthinking everything again. "Hey, everything will be okay," I said to her. "I have an idea. How about having your party at the restaurant? We will reserve the best tables available." Her eyes brightened right away. I knew my restaurant was very popular in town, and Lisa really wanted to show it to her friends. "Really?" she exclaimed, quickly taking out her phone. "Wow, my Instagram is going to be really awesome. Everyone at school will be really jealous." I got really involved in getting ready. I wanted everything to be just right for her. I took her shopping for a dress, a beautiful blue one that made her look so grown up I almost cried in the fitting room. "How many people do you want to invite?" I asked her one evening while we were looking at the details. She paused for a bit, playing with her napkin. "About 30 people." "Awesome. Can you please give me a guest list? I want to make sure we have enough space and food for everyone." "Oh, I haven't made one yet," she said fast. "Just plan for 30, all right?" Looking back, I should have pressed harder about that list. But I was so caught up in making everything perfect that I just nodded and moved on. The day of the party arrived, and everything looked amazing. The tables were beautifully decorated. The food was perfect. And Lisa looked stunning in her new dress. James's relatives were there. Lisa's friends were taking selfies everywhere. And everyone seemed to be having a great time. And then she walked in. I recognized Lisa's mom immediately, even though she was swaying slightly on her feet. She was clearly drunk, her eyes glassy, as she announced to everyone that she was here to wish her daughter a happy birthday. I was sitting next to Lisa when her mom stumbled over to our table. She glared at me like I was something she'd scraped off her shoe. "Get up," she demanded, waving her hand at me. "That's my seat. I'm her real mother, not you." I tried to keep my voice calm and reasonable. There were plenty of empty seats at the next table with the other guests. "Why don't you join them?" "No," she practically shouted. "This is my place. You need to get out of my place. Who do you think you are?" I looked at James, desperately hoping he'd say something, do something, anything to diffuse the situation. But my husband just sat there, his face red, staring down at his plate like it was the most fascinating thing he'd ever seen. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my voice steady despite the scene unfolding in my restaurant. This was Lisa's special day, and I wasn't about to let it be completely ruined if I could help it. "Let me be very clear," I said, looking directly at Lisa's mom. "You have two choices. You can either take a seat at the next table with the other guests, or I can have security escort you out." Her face contorted with rage. "Oh, listen to you, little Miss Moneybags," throwing her weight around. She staggered slightly, grabbing the edge of the table to steady herself. "You think you can buy everything, don't you? Buy my husband, buy my daughter's love." The other diners were starting to stare. I could see my regular customers at nearby tables trying not to look while obviously listening to every word. My staff were hovering uncertainly at the edges of the room, waiting for my signal. "You just waltz in here with your fancy restaurant and your big house," Lisa's mom continued, her voice getting louder with each word. "Think you can replace me because you've got money? Well, guess what? You can't buy family." Before anyone could react, she grabbed a plate of food and hurled it to the floor. The crash of breaking china seemed to echo through the suddenly silent restaurant. Then another plate followed, and another. Food splattered across the expensive carpet I just had installed last month. I caught my security team's eye and gave them a subtle nod. They moved in smoothly, professionally, just as they'd been trained. "Ma'am, it's time for you to leave," the head of security said firmly, taking her arm. I watched as they escorted her out, her screams echoing down the hallway until the front door finally closed behind her. The silence that followed was deafening. I stood up, plastering on my best restaurant owner smile. "I'm so sorry for the disturbance, everyone. Please enjoy your meals." Another round of drinks for all tables on the house. The regular customers seemed to take this in stride, returning to their conversations after a few minutes. But at our table, where Lisa's friends and family sat, the whispers were constant. I could see them shooting glances at Lisa, at James, at me. The story would be all over social media by morning, I was sure. Lisa sat there, pale as a ghost, pushing food around her plate. The beautiful blue dress suddenly seemed to dwarf her, making her look young and vulnerable. The Instagram-perfect party she dreamed of had turned into a nightmare. "I have a headache," she said after about an hour, her voice barely above a whisper. "Can we go home?" The party broke up quickly after that. Everyone made polite excuses, but I could hear them whispering as they left. "Poor Lisa. Did you see her mom? Can you believe what happened?" As soon as we got home, Lisa went straight to her room. I followed her upstairs, wanting to talk, to comfort her somehow. "Lisa, honey, can we talk?" I need to be alone right now," she said, closing the door in my face. I found James in the kitchen, staring into a glass of whiskey. "Did you invite her?" I asked quietly. "Did you tell your ex-wife about the party?" He shook his head. "No, I wouldn't do that." And suddenly it all clicked. Why Lisa had been so evasive about the guest list. Why she'd refused to show it to me. She had invited her mother herself. Despite everything, despite the history, despite the custody issues, she wanted her mom there. The morning after the birthday disaster, Lisa came down to breakfast looking like she hadn't slept at all. She slid into her usual chair, not making eye contact with anyone. "How are you feeling, sweetie?" I asked, trying to keep my voice light and normal. "Fine," she muttered, staring at her cereal bowl. And that was it. One word. The days that followed were like living in a ghost house. Lisa went from being my chatty, bubbly stepdaughter to practically a stranger. Whenever I walked into a room where she was talking with James, she'd immediately clam up. It was like someone had hit a mute button. I tried to talk to James about it one night after Lisa had gone to bed. "Don't you think we should do something? Maybe get her to talk to someone?" He just waved his hand dismissively. "She's fine. She's just processing what happened. Give her space." But it wasn't fine. Nothing about this was fine. Despite the tension at home, we all showed up for Lisa's graduation ceremony. James and I sat in the audience, and I clapped until my hands hurt when they called her name. She looked beautiful in her cap and gown, and for a moment, when she glanced our way and smiled, I thought maybe things were finally getting better. We had a celebration at our house afterward. I'd ordered all of Lisa's favorite dishes from the restaurant. The mushroom risotto she loved. Those little crab cakes she always stole from the kitchen when she visited me at work. Even that ridiculous chocolate cake that takes 3 days to make properly. Her classmates came over, and the house was full of laughter and excited chatter about college plans and summer vacations. For a few hours it felt almost normal again. Lisa was smiling, talking, looking like her old self. I started to relax, thinking maybe we turned a corner. Then her phone rang. Lisa stepped into the hallway to answer it, but came back a few minutes later with a determined look on her face. She walked straight up to me, the first time she'd voluntarily approached me in days. "My mom's coming over," she announced. "She wants to congratulate me on graduating." My stomach dropped. "Absolutely not," I said, memories of the birthday disaster still fresh in my mind. "Lisa, think about what happened at your birthday. She showed up drunk, caused a scene, and destroyed property." "That was your fault." Lisa cut me off, her voice rising. "None of that would have happened if you'd just given up your seat to her. She's my real mom. You should have just moved." I stood there, feeling like I'd been slapped. All this time, all these days of silence, and this was what she'd been thinking. That I was the one to blame. I turned to James, desperately hoping he'd finally step up and be the father his daughter needed. "James, please tell her. Tell her how inappropriate her mother's behavior was at the birthday party." But James just sat there, examining his shoes like they held the secrets of the universe. The same deafening silence I'd gotten used to lately. The same cowardly retreat I'd seen at the restaurant. Something inside me snapped. 5 years of trying to be the perfect stepmom, of walking on eggshells, of making excuses for everyone else's behavior, it all came pouring out. "Listen," I said to Lisa. "That was my restaurant. I arranged that entire party for you. I bought you that dress you wanted so badly. I did everything I could to make it perfect. And your mother? She showed up drunk, caused a scene, and destroyed property. She didn't even bring you a present, Lisa. All she brought was chaos and embarrassment." Lisa's face went from angry to furious in an instant. "Oh my God, here we go," she shouted, throwing her hands up. "It's always about the money with you, isn't it? I paid for this, I bought that. You think because you have money, you can control everyone and everything." She spun around to face her classmates, who were standing awkwardly in our living room, clearly wishing they were anywhere else. "My real mom will be here soon," she announced with a bitter laugh. It'll be nice to finally have a normal person here instead of this. She gestured at me like I was something disgusting she found on the bottom of her shoe. Your mother is not coming into this house, I said firmly, trying to keep my voice steady despite the anger and hurt building inside me. Not after what happened at the restaurant. That was when Lisa completely lost it. Her face turned red and she started screaming at me in front of everyone. You're not my mother, she shrieked. You're nothing to me. You're nobody. Who do you think you are to tell me what to do? Keep your filthy nose out of my business. You're just some woman my dad married for her money. The room went dead silent. I could see Lisa's friends shifting uncomfortably, some staring at their phones, others finding the ceiling suddenly fascinating. Lisa turned to her friends, her voice dripping with venom. Let's get out of here. I don't want to celebrate in her house anyway. She emphasized the word "her" like it was something dirty. They all filed out quickly, nobody making eye contact with me. The front door slammed so hard the windows rattled. I stood there in my empty living room, surrounded by half-eaten food and abandoned plates, feeling like I'd been hit by a truck. Surely now, finally, James would say something. He'd have to stand up for me after this, right? James cleared his throat. When he spoke, his voice was cold and hard. You had no right to throw the house and money in her face like that. You didn't need to remind her that this is your house and your money, paid for everything. That was low. I stared at him, feeling like I was seeing him clearly for the first time. Are you kidding me right now? Where were you when your ex-wife was throwing plates around my restaurant? Where were you just now when your daughter was screaming insults at me in front of her entire graduating class? You're the adult here, he snapped. You should know better than to get into arguments with a teenager. And you should know better than to bury your head in the sand like a coward, I shot back. But that's what you do, isn't it? You just sit there silently while your ex-wife and your daughter treat me like garbage. Well, guess what? I'm done being everyone's punching bag. James's face turned an even darker shade of red. Without another word, he stormed off upstairs. I heard the guest room door slam a few minutes later. The next morning's breakfast was like sitting in a morgue. James pushed his eggs around his plate, not looking at me. I was about to get up and leave when Lisa stumbled in, still wearing her clothes from the graduation party. The smell of alcohol hit me before she even made it to the table. I looked at James, waiting for him to say something, anything about our teenage daughter coming home drunk at 9:00 a.m. But he just kept studying those fascinating eggs. Where have you been all night? I asked, trying to keep my voice neutral. Lisa turned to me, her bloodshot eyes filled with contempt. None of your business, she sneered. You're not my mother. You're not anyone. Just an empty space taking up room in this house. Then she turned and stumbled upstairs to bed. James just sat there, silent as always. I was starting to think silence was his superpower. The next week was like living in a house with a particularly vindictive ghost. Lisa wouldn't speak to me directly at all. Instead, she'd talk about me like I wasn't even there. Dad, she'd say, pointing at me like I was a piece of furniture, can you ask your wife to pass the salt? Or she'd walk into a room and announce to James, this woman is in my way, waiting for me to move. I kept my mouth shut and watched it all unfold. After 5 years of trying to be the perfect stepmom, I was done. Let them show their true colors, and boy, did they ever. It was Sunday, and James and I were having another silent dinner when Lisa burst into the dining room, waving an envelope like she'd won the lottery. Dad, I got in, she shouted, practically dancing around the table. Berkeley accepted me. I got into my dream school. I watched as she hugged her father, both of them grinning ear to ear. Then Lisa turned to him and said, with a smirk I'll never forget. "Tell your wife she needs to pay for my tuition." Something inside me just snapped. I smiled, not a nice smile, and said clearly, "I won't be paying for your college education. You've made it very clear that I'm not your mother." I'm nobody, remember? Just an empty space. Well, this empty space's wallet is closed. "Why don't you ask your real mother to pay for college?" Lisa's face turned an alarming shade of red. "You vindictive expletive," she screamed, tears starting to stream down her face. "You're doing this to punish me. You're just evil." I stood there, feeling strangely calm, as she hurled insult after insult at me. It was like watching a storm through a window. I could see the chaos, but it couldn't touch me anymore. "Dad." She whirled around to face James. "Make her pay. She has to pay." "Tell her." James cleared his throat, using that patronizing tone I'd grown to hate. "Come on, honey, stop joking around. You know you need to pay for Lisa's education." I pushed my chair back and stood up. I've made myself perfectly clear. I will not pay tens of thousands of dollars in tuition for someone who has spent weeks telling me I'm nothing to her. Someone who treats me like I'm less than dirt in my own home. I turned and walked out of the dining room, Lisa's screams following me up the stairs. I could hear her throwing what sounded like another spectacular tantrum. Plates crashing, chairs scraping, theatrical sobs. Like mother, like daughter, I thought grimly. I sat in my bedroom, listening as the chaos downstairs slowly died down. I knew it wasn't over. James would be up soon enough, ready to play his part in this family drama. Sure enough, about 30 minutes later, my bedroom door burst open. James stormed in, his face flushed with anger. "I'm sick of this," he spat. "I'm so tired of you playing these games. You need to grow up and pay for Lisa's education." I looked at him calmly from where I sat on our bed. "No, you and your ex-wife can figure out how to pay for Berkeley. I'm sure between the two of you can work something out." He started pacing the room like a caged animal. "You're being completely selfish. She's just a teenager, for God's sake. You're the adult here. You need to be the bigger person." I watched him pace, remembering all the times he'd used that same argument. Be the bigger person. Let it go. She's just a kid. Always making excuses. Always expecting me to smile, nod, and open my wallet while they treated me like garbage. "A teenager who's old enough to know better," I said quietly. "A teenager who's made it very clear how she feels about me. Why should I invest in her future when she's shown nothing but contempt for me?" James stopped pacing and turned to face me, his expression hard. "Fine then. Let me make this simple for you. Either you pay for Lisa's education, or I'm filing for divorce." He clearly expected me to cave, to break down crying or beg him not to leave, or immediately agree to pay. That's what the bigger person would do, right? I shrugged. "Okay, get a divorce." The look on his face was almost comical. His mouth opened and closed a few times, but no words came out. He clearly hadn't expected me to call this bluff. "I'll call my lawyer first thing tomorrow morning," I added, my voice steady. "In the meantime, you and Lisa should start looking for a new place to live." James stood there for what felt like forever, staring at me like he'd never seen me before. Finally, without a word, he turned and left the room, closing the door quietly behind him. The next morning, I walked downstairs to find James and Lisa sitting at the dining room table, waiting for me like some kind of ambush. The scene was perfectly staged. Lisa with her red-rimmed eyes, James with his practiced, concerned father expression. "Honey," James said, smiling that manipulative smile I'd somehow never noticed before. We've all had a chance to calm down and think about things." Lisa nodded eagerly, like a well-trained puppet. "We all overreacted yesterday," she added, her voice sweet as honey. I stood in the doorway, feeling a strange sense of clarity wash over me. It was like I was seeing them both for the first time, really seeing them. "The thing is," James continued, his voice taking on that reasonable tone he used when he wanted something, "we're family. Families fight, but they also make up. And since you were the one who escalated things with this college situation, it would mean a lot if you took the first step toward reconciliation." Lisa jumped in right on cue. "Yeah, and if you helped with tuition, it would show that you're really sorry and want to make things right." I almost laughed. They really thought they could manipulate me this easily. That all it would take was some fake remorse and practiced lines about family. "Actually," I said, pulling out my phone, "I just got off the phone with my lawyer 5 minutes ago. The divorce papers should be ready by this afternoon." The change in their expressions was instantaneous. Lisa's sweet smile vanished, replaced by shock. James's face turned that familiar shade of angry red. I looked at Lisa. "Well done. You won't have to worry about your not mother getting in the way of your life anymore. Isn't that what you wanted?" Lisa started crying, real tears this time, not the fake ones from before. But I was finished with being controlled by teenage tears. James got up quickly and his chair tipped over. He went upstairs without saying anything. I heard him pulling drawers open and banging closet doors. They packed quietly. "Stop the tricky talks. Stop the fake tears." Only the noise of packing suitcases and doors closing. I thought that was the last of it. I made a mistake. The messages began that night. First, we hear from James. "We all said things we wish we hadn't. Let's discuss this in a grown-up way." Next, from Lisa. "I'm sorry if I made you feel bad, but I think you're being really unfair about college." When I didn't reply, they became meaner. "Your stubbornness is hurting this family." "I hope you feel good being by yourself with your money. You might feel sorry about this when you get older and don't have anyone around." The divorce was fast because of the prenup I had asked for. James tried to argue about it, but my lawyer quickly stopped him. He got nothing, not a penny from my restaurant's profits, not a dime from my savings. Sometimes I hear things about them from friends we both know. They live in a small apartment on the other side of town. Lisa didn't have enough money for Berkeley, so she is working at a mall now. James is working to start his contracting business again, but things are tough. I changed the decorations in the house since they left. I got rid of all the furniture that made me think of them. The space seems larger now, brighter in a way. Or maybe that's just me, finally free from the burden of trying to buy love from people who only wanted to sell it.